when you're called in to help a team that's stuck in conflict or avoidance, where do you start?
I think it's really important to understand what's happening in the environment. So I like to start with understanding the culture of the organization, and understanding how decisions are being made and understanding the personality of each individual member on the team. That way I can understand where people are coming from, what the actual pain points are, what the environment is that they're operating in, and then understand where people's strengths are so that when we come together in a collective group, which is the next step, I can understand how the dynamics are. How are people relating to one another? And how are the leaders operating on the team? Are they being vulnerable? Are they being open, honest? Are they allowing for others to speak their minds? And do people really understand one another? Are they assuming positive intent? And so I really like to understand what's happening in the environment and then understand how people operate individually to then understand the bigger picture with the team.
All right. So you're trying to really get the lay of the land individually and collectively.
Yeah, yeah. What are the triggers, right? Behaviorally.
Agatha, how would you add to that?
Yeah, this is a really good question. Oftentimes when folks are stuck in this conflict paralysis, what can be helpful is to start with this framework in terms of fears, hopes, dreams, and really beginning to ask folks, let's sort of get clear on what we're all really hoping will come out of these conversations. What are you potentially afraid will happen if things don't change? What are you hoping for if they do? And what's your dream scenario for this team, 3 to 6 months from now? Um, and I think this really works because we're acknowledging the issues without necessarily wallowing in it, right? Like it kind of like helps us to skip past a lot of the endless backstory. And then, everyone's energy begins to shift from, what went wrong to, what could go right. And it also helps to reveal, shared interests, other teams or folks within the team will begin to discover, the same things that, or the same dreams and hopes that they may have, or the same fears that they may have. So finding that, those points of alignment can begin to bring a sense of unity into the conversation. And it also builds, of course, that immediate connection. And I think, what comes out of this conversation is that vulnerability, right? We're kind of asking folks to be a bit vulnerable when we're asking them to share, their hopes, fears, and dreams about this particular issue. And so, if we're able to get there, and of course, folks have the freedom to share what they want to share. They don't necessarily have to share everything. They have that agency and that power in that regard. But that vulnerability begins to open up the space to build a foundational level of psychological safety around discussing or tackling this particular issue. So I agree with a lot of what Tiffany said, approaching it from just getting the lay of the land, the cultural landscape, the different strengths that people have and how to leverage those in these conversations. But I think then the next step is, okay, how do we start this conversation or this dialogue from this forward-facing perspective?
So you're going to get them talking right away, right off the bat, and see if you can get some of that, air that out right away to get to
Yeah,
the heart of the matter. Good.
absolutely.
Bill, how would you add to that?
Um, these are great answers. I think a lot of us probably have similar methodologies and are doing a lot of things to get the teams talking. First thing I want to do is acknowledge that there are apparently two of me here today. I don't know what the other Jill Katz box is, so I apologize that I seem to be logged in twice, and I don't know how I've accomplished that. I'm really proud of myself. I've never been.
You cloned yourself. Yeah.
I have to say, I'm constantly trying to figure out how I can be in two places at once. And today I finally figured it out. I just don't know how.
There is two of you. That's so funny.
I don't know how I don't. Oh, you don't see it on the audience
Nope.
side. Okay, well, I'm
I
looking
see it
at
on
the
the
screen.
panelists.
Somehow there's two of me. But anyway, um, so I like to say that we never start with the problem. We always start with the people because a business is actually non-existent without its people. It doesn't matter what business you're actually in the business of people. And that's a really interesting thing to think about. And I say that the work we do is just going in and shaking a snow globe.
Mhm.
We just need to go in and shake what's already there, but give people the opportunity to see it up in the sky and then let it resettle so that you can look at it from a different vantage point. And if we do our job well, that's what we do in the business that we are in. And so we're snow globe shakers. That's how I like to think of starting. Oftentimes, when we go in with a team, we start up front by having some one-on-ones with team members before we get into the room. And that can happen in the form of one-on-one conversations or meetings. We oftentimes send out something that we call a culture health survey, where we interview members of the team and ask them to actually rate themselves on factors regarding the team's level of candor, the team's level of trust, how honest they believe they can be in the room, what's holding them back, and asking them lots of similar questions to some of the great ideas that Agatha shared. And then when we get into the room, we're already pretty rich with data. We start always with some kind of exercise that we call an energizer to help the team immediately become vulnerable and let themselves out of their work construct so that within the first hour they forget for a second that they're part of some kind of work hierarchy. No one works for anybody anymore. There's no more direct reports in the room. Suddenly you're in a room of a group of human beings, individuals, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, women, men, binary, non-binary, it doesn't matter. You're just human beings sitting at a table, all who have feelings and thoughts. And we really try to start from there and then look at the data, look at what people are feeling, work through it from there. And finally, by the end of the day, no matter what we've gone through, and we've got a pretty particular framework that we use, we always bring it back to the business.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's so many different approaches. And I think it also depends, also, there's so much on the organizational context, right? And the reason why you're being brought in, the conversation that you're having, right? All right, so I'm going to move to the next question, and we're going to start with you, Megan, with this next question. Thank you so much, Jill, Tiffany, and Agatha on that question. So, Megan, let's move to this question around change readiness, right? So we know that people can resist change for a myriad of reasons, whether it's a system change, an organization change, a leadership change. So, in your experience, what signals tell you that a team is ready and willing to change? Any patterns, any behaviors that help you know, hey, this is the right time to invest in deeper work together? What are those signals that tell you? What are those behaviors, anything, those patterns that communicate that to you?
So what I've noticed, and again, in my experience in like leading and being an HR business partner to a variety of groups of businesses, is that communication starts to shift immediately, like more of it. And I think that also people start to be more solution oriented when bringing, instead of just bringing problems to the table, they're bringing solutions. And so I think all of that. Is the initial starter, right? Like everyone seems to be on board, maybe that we're, as an HR partner checking in and getting, starting to get more positive feedback that you're, progressing in a forward direction. People, again, are engaging with each other more collaboratively. So to me, those are all the behavioral changes that start to signal like, okay, I think we're moving in the right direction.
Good. So, like, when you're seeing more like participation, I hear like even like org
Right.
participation or even in curiosity.
Right. And yeah, curiosity. And again, like I think that more solution oriented, it's easy to complain about everything going on in the world at work, et cetera. But when you start to see people doing less of that and maybe even raising a problem, but also adding a solution to it, I think that's when really, again, like that's a big shift and change because then you're all like trying to make things better and not just complaining for the sake of.
Tiffany, anything else? Anything that you see like, hey, when I see this one thing or this thing that happens that I've seen all the time, like I know a team's ready.
Yeah, I think it's a lot in the dynamic, right? The relational piece of being able to once, come in, we set the culture, have an understanding of the environment, and then you start to have the team discussions. You bring in the data to understand one another, whether it's DISC or another assessment as far as where people lay. And you get to have the dynamic start off with just general discussion. And then after some time in the session, people really start to want to learn about one another. People really start to learn about each other's strengths. There's a lot of questions rather than just kind of listening to the facilitator, listening to the data. There's a lot of genuine curiosity that comes out and the use of their language. It comes into, well, I see you do this versus I see us do this. So it moves towards a lot of us and we, and you kind of see it as a team dynamic of we're all in this together. And if you're doing those sessions right, you start to move towards that, and then you don't just start, but then you're really in it, and you have
Right.
that be the norm. And that's really where you start to see, okay, now we're a cohesive unit going through this together. Now, what's the goal for what we are trying to achieve? What are the challenges that we're going through? And really having that set the tone is so important and allows for those behaviors to not just be signals, but they're just sustainable.
A lot of language. Okay, so I'm going to pause just for a minute just to check in with the audience. So my friends in the audience, is there anything you notice that you haven't heard said yet that when you're working with a team that you notice behaviorally or in language that you haven't heard said yet from our panel that you notice, hey, I can see when a team is ready for change. Something that maybe you notice for the team you worked with or a team you serve on, pop it in the chat. We're going to keep talking, but I want to hear from you because I want you to, like, as you're hearing what's being spoken about, anything that you've noticed that you haven't heard said yet or that resonates that you've heard, pop it in the chat while we keep talking. Okay. Um, Agatha, anything else that something you distinct, maybe even a specific example of like a team that you work with? And maybe I'll ask you to think about that also too, Jill, like maybe like a specific example, like with of a team that displayed something, um, that a behavior or an action that sort of rose to the surface that showed that readiness. Go ahead, Agatha.
Yeah. So, in the conflict mediation slash conflict management world, we probably all have stories where things went really decently well, not always perfectly, but decently well. And we also probably have stories where it didn't go so well. And I've got quite a bit of experience where things didn't necessarily go so well because some of these things that we're talking about, that change for readiness just wasn't there, right? That ownership language, going from like the thing that's away from us that keeps happening towards we. So what could we do? What if I do this, right? And then also the curiosity that takes over judgment and certainty. So asking questions and trying to come to these conversations with solutions. But the other thing that I want to also surface is interpersonal risk. So a lot of times change readiness flows from the top down, right? So leaders have to exemplify and model that they are ready for this change to happen, whatever that change is. And sometimes that change requires a certain level of vulnerability that maybe leaders are not ready for. And so addressing this head on is so, so vital for me as a consultant anyway, and as an executive coach, and really getting to the root of what is that resistance to vulnerability. Some of it could be tied to external facing partnerships. There's just so many ways that so many different aspects of the work that could present as barriers to vulnerability, and leaders taking that interpersonal risk that's required so that team members who are ready for the change believe that leaders are also ready for the change, right? And so I will often advise clients, with just sentence starters, just communication tools, um, reflection exercises to help them get there. One specific example I can just quickly name is a school, not a school leader, but a small nonprofit organization that I was working with a couple years back, where there were all these issues with their team conflicts in the ways that they were approaching coaching teachers on the field. And one thing I really appreciated and the team appreciated as we began to address the different conflicts within the team was he immediately owned up to, I realize I've been avoiding some of these difficult conversations with varying excuses in terms of, busy work schedule, et cetera. But really it's because I'm a little bit afraid of confronting this conflict. And, I notice it's making things worse. Here's what we can begin to do to begin to open up the conversation. What about you all? What are you afraid of will happen as we begin to approach this conversation? I think that was a green light moment for all of us, including the team, to know, okay, I believe that we're actually ready for change as opposed to just saying that we're ready for change.
Got it. No, that's a great example. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jill, any other examples you have around change readiness?
Um, I think that there are a few examples, but one of the things that I was going to bring up, which I think is a little different, is how we know that a team is ready in the first place.
Mm.
And so I don't know about some of my other colleagues here, but oftentimes by the time something gets to us, it's on fire.
That's true.
And I think that's a really important thing to call out for a group of people that have gathered here today that are organizational development experts, coaches. Most of the time, team leaders are not calling us the moment they think that something smells bad.
Mhm.
Most of the time, leaders are trying to muddle through or more often ignore what's happening on their team because they want to, quote, get the business done. And so by the time something has made it to an expert, to a coach, to an HR business partner, to an outside consultant, usually it's pretty hot. Usually it's because we can't get work done the way that we did anymore, or there is some type of roadblock, or there's a person on the team, or more than one person on the team who's creating a major problem. And so the signal that a team is ready is that something is really impeding the system. And so by the time we enter stage right, usually the temperature has risen. And I think that's a really interesting point to consider for the work that many of us do, that we're usually going in and there is a sick patient already.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of wanted to add that. Um, yes.
No, it's so true. Yeah, so you're getting a lot of agreement. So Jeff said we're firefighters or janitors.
Yes, we are
Typically.
firefighters or janitors. And so there is by definition a change that's going to be made. And I was listening to Agatha's story and I was like, yes, yes, yes. As you were telling your story, Agatha, because I can think of I mean, I've done this countless times, but I can think of stories that go anywhere from someone being promoted to someone voting themselves off the island. And I've countless examples of what these sessions and processes have led to in order for a team to get themselves back to health.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen overnight. It is not a one moment fix all process. One of the first things I say to teams is don't think that we're going to come in and one day, oftentimes a CEO will call me and say, can you come in and fix this? We're having an offsite on X date. Could you come in and fix this? And I'll say, no,
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 it's
we can
well,
come in, we can start a really, really powerful conversation. And if we do a great job, this is how far we'll get on the first day. But this is a process, a
right.
journey. So no, if you want us to come in and fix this in one day, you need to do something else. Go paint pottery, and, drink wine, and that's what you should do for that day instead.
Right. No, and that segues into our next question. I just want to address, we have some great things in the chat, and then I'm going to come back to that next question. Because we're going to talk about teams looking for quick fixes. So Tiffany's agreeing with you. She said, so true, Jill, it's on fire by the time we were called in. I now address this head on in my messaging and conversations. This is costing so much more the longer leaders and stakeholders wait, right? So they're waiting till it gets to a breaking point. Tiffany also should address the costs up front, not their investment in our work, yet the price they are paying the longer they wait to address it, the high tax or price of avoidance, right? And also the benefit, right? They're not just paying. I also say this, I'm glad you brought this up, Tiffany. People are not paying for the hour of my time that I may spend with them. They are paying for the benefit of the long-term benefit of the payoff of now what their people are going to be equipped for and what that is going to provide the business, right? They're not paying me the hour to walk their dog, right? It's going to end. They're paying me for what I'm going to equip and empower their people with that they are going to now use in how they get their job done. So I never answer a question about an hourly rate because that is completely irrelevant to what I do. And it's irrelevant, right? Because that's not what's happening, right? So also Jeff shared about change readiness from language use when they are all displaying a willingness to do the work to improve the situation, whatever it takes to make us better. When there are only one or two people in that mindset, there's a lack of alignment on the issue or the willingness to be vulnerable, be open-minded, and grow together. So Jill shared, it's so true. Yes, do a paint and sip for your offsite if you're looking for a quick fix. So many teams looked for quick fixes. How do you set realistic expectations about what transformation actually takes? So Tiffany, how do you set that realistic expectation? What does team transformation actually take?
Yeah, I think I'd echo a lot of what Jill mentioned. It's a process. Micro behavior shifts happen over time. Understanding the real issue at the heart of what's going on is important. And I think there's a setting expectations and resetting expectations that needs to happen time and time again. So when it comes to the shift, it's part of it's the shift isn't happening overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. It takes time. And being open and honest about that, I've noticed makes leaders show up differently, where it's not just something that can be solved quickly, but it requires their participation and their championship and their ownership. To really make the change happen. And they play such an influential and critical role in setting the tone that without that conversation, it might just seem like an easy fix, and it's not. And it's a process, and it takes everyone. And really having that conversation and reminding them of that conversation as one-on-ones happen in group conversations, really being open and honest about that is critical.
Excellent. Yeah, Tiffany showed there is no quick fix. If avoidance resistance is happening in a one-day, one-event experience, it's only going to open up the space. It takes a process, like Agatha just said. Yet too many stakeholders want an event. Yes, Tiffany. Woo! I once wrote a blog, Tiffany, called "Why You Should Never Hire Me for 2-day Training." Now, don't get me wrong, I'll take the money, right? But a lot of times I will tell people, like, look, you could hire me for this, and I will take your money, but you're really lighting it on fire, right? You're just lighting it on fire. Like behavior change does not happen in a day. And I will also liken it to like learning a language. I'm like, do you remember, did you take a language in high school? They're like, yes. And I'm like, did you learn French in a day workshop? They're like, no. I'm like, okay, great. You learned it in 4 years because it was a language. Leadership is a language. It's a behavior system. It does not happen in a day. I cannot help if you have a leadership problem, I can't solve it in a day, the same way you can learn French in a day. Okay. So yes, it is up to us to position and share the value. The real ROI is the process, not a tedious process, yet it will take more time than one touch point. If you want edutainment, That's by all means, go let your money on fire, check your box. I'm not your gal, right? So by all means, go do it. Say that you put on a training, say you put on a workshop, have a day. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with workshops. They can be valuable, they can be great experiential learning if all your goal is to enlighten people.
Mhm.
If your goal is to enlighten people, to have people could have a good experience, to have people take some good nuggets, that's what conferences are for, right? That's what those are for. Those are conferences. That's why we go to conferences, to network. Don't get me wrong, I still do workshops. I still get paid to do workshops. It's not that they're not valuable, that their purpose is not to cause change. Their purpose is not to cause lasting change. That's not what their purpose is. They can ignite something, but they can't cause lasting change.
Yeah, I like to think of it as a mirror raiser, right? We're holding up the mirror
Yeah,
to people and their realities and walking them through the process.
absolutely. So Megan, how about you? Well, actually, let's go to this different question for you, Megan. How do you help teams practice courageous conversations, especially if you're not in the room, right? So you can't be in the room with every team you support, right? How do you help them practice courageous conversations?
So I think it's important to like understand, again, go back to the person, right, and how they engage with life. Are they an introvert, extrovert, to know like where the baseline is with each person that you are speaking with, because that will help you determine like how willing they might be to engage again in the courageous conversations and like what how to help coach them properly. And I think a lot of it is, we do this exercise. Sometimes like start, stop, continue and getting feedback on, right, as like a framework. And so I think again, um, setting the expectation at the beginning of right when you're trying to work through a challenge with the whole team, for example, is to have, individual conversations with people and then present it as a group to be like, okay, there's a lot of similarities, right? And so when people start to see like feel like they're not the only one, I notice they're also more willing to be more open or vocal, or again, maybe they're not going to be the loudest person in the room, but maybe they're giving you feedback in a private conversation that you can still present as a group and you're not, calling out people. So everyone feels like in their way, they're being heard without maybe being put on the spot. Because again, it's like we live in a, yeah, like obviously like lots of diverse thoughts and opinions and ways of working, and you just have to kind of continue to meet everybody where they are, and it's just going to be very different for each individual.
Excellent. Um, Agatha, how about you? How do you encourage people to have courageous conversations when you can't be with them, when you can't be in the moment?
Yeah, I think there's a saying that says, maybe it's from Crucial Conversations. It's something like, "Practice doesn't make perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect." I may have butchered that, but I do believe in like structured practice and having accountability partners. So something I'll often guide teams through is just the ways to practice having difficult conversations on low stakes topics first. So things that either are relevant or not relevant at all, but very much low stakes. Practice role playing that with just feedback scenarios, practicing what disagreement could look like, and doing that with an accountability buddy within their team, or maybe it's across teams that someone that they feel comfortable practicing that with. That peer support really does sort of like drive bravery and courage for that actual conversation that's going to take place. Something that I will often do too is the power of the pause. So assigning someone to be that sort of like that pause slash process observer to ask some of those poignant questions of how are we doing with this conversation right now? Is everyone feeling heard? How do we feel about the direction that this conversation is going? And this person is also just sort of watching for some of those tensions and calling out things that maybe we normally wouldn't see when we're in the weeds of a conversation. So those are just some like practical and tactical tools that folks can use to practice before the conversation and then during the conversation as well.
Jill, I know you have a model that may address this. Maybe I don't know if that and if this is the proper use for it, but Tell me a little bit about how you help empower people to have courageous conversations that when you're not in the room.
We're proud of our leadership model, which is candor, courage, and care. And it has a lot to do with the way that you deliver feedback and lead as the best person you can be. Candor is the what, it's being direct and honest with someone so that you can say what you need to say. Courage is the when, it's about not waiting, but saying what you need to say as quickly as possible so that people can be at their best. And care is the why. It's about coming from a place of good intention as often as possible, really, so that we can help other people function at their best. And the whole idea of candor, courage, and care is that all three need to be present at the same time because you can be really candid and courageous, but if you're not caring, you might hit really hard and really fast, but miss the heart. And you can be really courageous and really caring, but if you're not candid, then you're not saying what you need to say. And you can be really candid and caring, but if you wait too long, then you might miss your opportunity. And so the idea is to be candor, courage, and care all the time. And this is how you build a culture, how you lead, how you deliver feedback. And we bring our candor, courage, and care model to all of the work we do, and we teach it to the clients that we work with. And so the first thing is this is something that is, filtered in with all of the work that we do. So we are teaching people skills and hopefully infiltrating the culture. So there is something really important and robust that is left behind. We also believe that it is critical to be part of a coaching process in between the sessions, which we call offsites. So the ideal client relationship we have is maybe 3 or 4 full day sessions or full day offsites in a year. And then we coach the members of that leadership team in between those sessions so that there really is a full year engagement. And that really speaks to this concept that we're not coming in and solving in a day. As you said so well, Stephanie, you can't learn a language in a day. You're going to learn a language over time and actually get personal one-on-one time. You're going to get group time. It's going to be a really there's a lot of different ways we're going to touch you and impact you here with this learning and development experience.
Excellent. So Tiffany, round us out. How do you impact? Thank you so much, Jill, for that. And thank you for that explanation of that model. It's brilliant. Love models. Tiffany, round us out. How do you help people have courageous conversations when you're not in the room?
Yeah, I like to, in addition to having those one-on-ones and those group sessions, and I call them courage prompts, kind of the idea that Agatha brought up of courage prompts. How do we want to approach each other when we do it as soon as possible? Having those courage prompts be practiced throughout, and then it kind of just becomes a muscle that's built over time and that they continue to use it. But I think really making sure that after the engagement is over, they understand how to show up for one another, and the behavioral change of how they come to conversations is completely different. So the courage prompts helps with it. Sometimes teams enjoy things like team agreements where it's very clear guidance as far as how they promise to come together when a challenge arises, because it's going to come up after we leave too. So those are some like little isms that we like to leave behind. But I think really that behavior change that happens through coaching individually in group sessions and in workshops is really what's important, and really making sure that we learn about one another. But the courage prompts people really like. I've seen creative things with our clients with like courage champions, and they kind of have like a favorite mascot of their teams, and they kind of refer to the mascot when they need to show up better and call each other out, and when they get more comfortable they enable themselves to call each other out. So there's different ways for different teams. Some things work better for certain teams than others, but those are little like isms that we've seen work well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We do have two questions that came in through the Q&A. I'm going to answer them. So if you did put them in, I'm going to answer them in just a few minutes. Thank you so much. Panel, hang out right there because I have two questions that I'm going to pitch back to you. I am just going to share a little bit about how Cloverleaf can help people with courageous conversations in between meetings and sessions. So I'm going to share my screen for a minute, and then I'm going to come back and ask my questions to the panel. So I'm going to share for just a minute and share my screen. So for those of you that are not Cloverleaf users, so Cloverleaf is an automated coaching platform that can integrate into your services, whether you coach, train, consult. I am an independent coach, trainer, and consultant, and I integrate it into all of my services. My cornerstone product is a coach skill training for leaders that I have been delivering since 2018, all over the country to any industry you could possibly imagine. And I've led it now to over 2,500 leaders in multiple industries. And so it's a 6-month program where people are learning leadership, they're learning coaching like a language. And so they are on the platform and their teams are also on the platform. So I may have 50 leaders in a cohort and they're learning coaching skills, and I can teach them coaching skills, but I can't necessarily teach them how specifically to coach Sue on their team. So through taking a number of assessments, Cloverleaf then uses that data to give specific automated coaching and feedback about how to specifically apply the learning that I am giving them to their team members. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is what we'd call a team dashboard. These are all standard assessments that you would hear of, like Myers-Briggs, what we call 16 types, like DISC. And so I would put all of the people on my program on my platform, and they would get to see all the results of the people on their platform. Don't get distracted by just the assessment piece. The assessment is kind of like the fuel that makes the red Ferrari go. So if you buy a red Ferrari, nobody really brags about the gas. The assessments are the data points that give Cloverleaf the power to go. And so you have all these common assessments like Enneagram, like this. You can see all of the results of all the people on your team. You've got Clifton Strengths on here. You've got all of these wonderful assessments. You can compare what's my Enneagram versus this person's Enneagram and how can we resolve conflict. I've been on a one-on-one coaching call with someone before and they start going into their drama and I say, wait a minute, let's just look at your two Enneagram types side by side. What could be going on here? And automatically I get solution focus. But what the real magic of Cloverleaf is that when I'm in between coaching sessions or in between training sessions is this piece. And this is what we call Cloverleaf Discover. I can go in here and say, I'm really having a problem giving feedback to Noor. What do I do? And based on all Noor's assessment data and my personality, it's going to tell me how I can speak to Noor, given my personality and given Noor's personality. It's going to talk about my tendencies and Noor's tendencies and how I can apply it. And it's giving me some suggestions. Now, I'm in the middle of delivering my coach training program to all of these individuals, and I'm teaching them active listening. I'm teaching them powerful questions. I'm teaching them goal setting, but I can't teach them about Noor's personality. So I'm teaching them skill, and then Cloverleaf is giving them approach. And I am reminding them, hey, you have access to this tool, but you can also learn about a team, okay? How can I help the marketing team be more open with each other? Even you as the practitioner can ask a question in here. Or the leader can say, how can I help my team be more open with each other? Now I can actually say, given the personalities of my specific team, I now can say, well, these specific people prefer this, and these specific people prefer this approach. And it's telling me, well, Tariq often looks for the reasoning behind actions, but Riley and Jordan may pause before sharing personal opinion. So this person's looking for this approach, this person's looking for that approach, and it's telling me how I might approach even a team meeting. I don't have to lay out all the DISC reports and try to cross-reference them. This immediately happens by cross-referencing all of this data. So now I don't have to sit there and email the coach and say, what should I do? I now give my client access to this. And I say, in between sessions, if you have a challenge, I want you to leverage this platform. This is something that I give access to all of my clients to so that they can have these courageous conversations in between sessions. And it's a much better use of me and my assessments than I used in the past. Quick question. What do you do when the main leader, the CEO, is part of the issue, but does not believe he is? And that HR has provided feedback on this and they got in trouble for not seeing it from the CEO's side. So what happens when the CEO is the problem?
One thing that's been helpful, again, this is not a one size fits all, right, is that getting the leaders directs, to have a separate conversation with each other, right? It's like, okay, one thing HR going, but if the direct line leaders are also coming together and sharing a similar message, it can help more with the change. Again, it's like, it's still challenging, but I think, and also going to that leader with, okay, maybe there's a laundry list of things that are like a hot button for people, but what are some things that um, people think, right? The direct reports maybe in HR can materially change that would have an impact, right? Knowing that you can't change everything at once, but like focusing on one or two things. So I think it's also, again, getting alignment at that like director, like those direct report level, because they are senior leaders and, and getting and providing that additional layer of feedback as well.
Okay, good. Excellent. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to ask the second question. How do you create psychological safety for transparent communication about how the team might be feeling if they're afraid of saying anything about the leadership or upper management?
It's dangerous territory at times to aim for psychological safety during courageous conversations. I think much more realistic aim is psychological bravery, and there's a framework that I've used with clients around this in terms of just taking ownership and having more agency in those conversations by how you prepare and how you show up during those conversations and then what happens afterwards. So there's definitely a pre-conversation or pre-mediation session, during mediation session, and then post-mediation session, action steps and questions that I have folks sort of consistently like reflect upon to help them build towards that bravery that they need. I don't want to discount psychological safety altogether. I think there is a foundational level we probably need to try to achieve for these conversations, but I would encourage folks to switch towards bravery and how you take ownership of your own psychological safety. And one quick question I have folks reflect upon is, what do I want to come out of this conversation or these series of conversations? And what are the healthy steps I can take if that is not the result? um like, what are the healthy steps I can take during the conversation when things may be going in the wrong direction and it feels like I have no power or no control over it? What are some of the things I can say? What are the curiosity type questions and promptings I can say to get us aligned in terms of values or the how as opposed to the what? So yeah, there are a multitude of things I could talk through in terms of tools that you could use before, during, and after the conversation, but really aiming for bravery more than safety is what I generally just try to advise clients in terms of this type of work.
What comes to mind for me is psychological safety can mean different things to different people, and it can look differently when you think about the individual level, the team level, and the organizational level. I think there's value of bringing in kind of a third, as neutral as possible, party that really understands the impact that the team can make to really have those transparent, open, individual conversations, and then ask those conversation of, what does psychological safety look like in a dream world to you individually, on a team, and in the environment of the organization, and then kind of doing a gap in understanding so that when you collectively come together, there could be some of that psychological safety and you build together. And when you get people to build together, they're more invested. And hopefully you see a little bit more of that ownership, or it just needs to be a ongoing conversation, which is likely always going to be the case anyway. But I think those are two really important frameworks that we like to use.
thank you, everyone on our panel. Thank you, Megan, Tiffany. Thank you to Jill. Thank you, Agatha, for being here. If you do want to find out more about Cloverleaf, there is a link